media friends, welcome. Brought to you by Rug Radio. I'm literally on holiday. I'm on summer holiday, but I had to just interject from my schedule and try and get on the show this guest because his work is so astonishing to me. Because again, the things here, we're here for builders, we're here for artists, and trying to find and discover the tools that allow us to work permissionlessly, asynchronously, and a little less moneyly, and trying to find ways to leverage this technology for our businesses, for our art. And Jim.BTC, creator of Ordinals, and co-founder of This Is Number One, has devised a way of using recursion, a technique that is devised to minimize individual inscription size by pointing to other files, other inscriptions. And so, Oni Force Fallen had this same thing. That was their way of pushing past like that 8-bit look within their collection to create, this very, very, modern, great looking art on Ordinals. And so, but Jim here has devised a way to utilize this to create music NFTs, music inscriptions. And so, bring on Jim to see what sort of dark black magic Snape stuff are you using here, Jim? Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Yeah, I mean, it seems like that, but for anyone who does magic, you know how quickly you can kill the magic by just showing them how simple something is.
And this is what we're here to do. We're here to kill magic, pull back the curtain, see what you're really wearing down below there, Jim, and sort out what it is that you've accomplished, because I think it's astonishing. But where is it that you started to try and create something like this? What's stimulated?
I guess it gives, to put it in perspective, why I'm doing this is because I was a musician. I mean, I still am a musician, but I don't earn an income from it anymore because I became jaded with it all. I did it for 20, 30 years. Several times I had really big sinks that I just the money didn't come to me for whatever reason. And there was a final straw when I had enough, and I got out of it, and I got into crypto. I was touring a lot. I wanted to get off the road. I discovered Bitcoin in 2012. I was immediately taken by it and what it meant for taking on the big guys like Western Union and MoneyGram for money remittance services, which was a big, having toured the world for a long time, it was something I was very conscious of.
That's why I got into it, honestly, as well too. I'm just this is a way to pay crews. This is a way to really just eliminate these middlemen that are doing the MoneyGrams, etc.
I mean, initially it was like the world's unbanked. It's like the world's unbanked with people who initially were in my targets. Now I feel like now that Bitcoin has achieved,
which is actually a quarter, more than a quarter, just in the US. A shocking thing is a quarter of the US is unbanked, and I can imagine just the world.
The larger population of the world is unbanked, and all they really need now is sort of mobile phones. They still have to get access to things, but there's still some barriers. But on the whole, the mission is accomplished for really destroying those middlemen, those financial middlemen who just punish the poorest people in the world. That was the most upsetting thing about it for me. But so once that was done, it felt like I could kind of get back to my roots. Music. So in 2019, I discovered again through the ATM. I was lucky because I remortgaged my house and imported the UK's first ATM in 2013 or 14, and that was my baptism by fire. I was like, I have to learn about this stuff. I'm not a developer. I'm not that technically minded in that way with code. Or finance, so I had to really learn, and it's been an amazing journey. I learned. I ended up becoming quite a successful trader for a bit, but then found my way back to music slowly because I found Stacks, which is a layer 2, which is where I founded. This is number one. We were the first sort of marketplace. We released the first NFTs on Stacks with some really big names you might have heard of, like Cara Delevingne and Fatboy Slim. Dave Stewart of the Eurythmics. I pulled all these massive names together into an empty room and said, you're not going to get much feedback right now, but believe me, in a decade or so, you're going to get
provenance. Provenance, guys.
You're going to get a lot of you're going to get a lot of good things in the future when people say, look, they really were ahead of the game. But so we did that. it wasn't really the answer. I was still looking. We wrote our own royalties into the, the first contract we did was the Fatboy Slim contract, and we'd written all these different royalties in. We had visual artists, we had the team, we had Fatboy Slim, we had a charity. Each of the artists, we asked them to choose a charity which would receive a portion of the funds. I think in the case of the Cara Delevingne one, the charity got all of the funds. But so we had these ideas, but we naively, we didn't really realize, we weren't going to be able to be the central point for trading for these. The second that these NFTs were out of our hands and they were in another marketplace, we couldn't force anyone to pay the royalties. And so it was a little bit back to the drawing board for me until Ordinals came along. And Ordinals came along and something changed, and it wasn't instant. My initial reaction to Ordinals, I was invited on a show as it was getting to around 10K Ordinals. They all wanted my opinion because I ran, I was one of the first marketplaces on Stacks, and I had to admit, look, I've seen the word buzzing about the place, but I've no idea what you guys are talking about. Give it to me in a few seconds. And I think it was Trevor. Trevor was in the chat, Trevor Owens, and Trevor explains it to me. And I'm like, my instant reaction was like, I was mortified. I'm like, did you just tell me that I can pay $2,000 to shut down the Bitcoin network for 10 minutes? Like, I was the biggest, most unbelievably frightening attack vector I've ever heard of. I've never been scared for Bitcoin in my life. And suddenly there I am, like live in a show, being the absolute party killer.
Yeah, right. We're going to kill Bitcoin here, guys.
Oh my God, it really freaked me out. But only for a few days. It took I gathered myself, had to think about things. I went back to kind of right back to the beginning, back to what I'd seen in the white paper that got me. And it was game theory. Ultimately, it was the game theory and the different incentive mechanisms, kind of all that make up Bitcoin. And I thought, this is a test. This is a test, and Bitcoin's probably going to pass it. I just don't know how, and that's what's scaring me. But it'll come, and it has. It was actually quite clear. The fees are just going to go up. It's going to price itself so that these attack vectors, it deals with them in that way. It's like it's still it's still something that I don't know exactly how this pans out. But at the beginning, all I saw was people doing JPEGs and BRC20s, all this text stuff, and I could see that this is better than Ethereum. But I've never really been one of the degen NFT type people. I'm very much about the technology. The technology is what excites me always, and I'm looking for answers. I like being at the forefront and hopefully be the first person to spot a solution, and then make sure that, certainly with what I'm trying to do here, I'm trying to democratize it. I don't really have a business plan as such. Really, I'm trying to build something that a community effort eventually comes on board, and then this library of sounds we only currently have in terms of high resolution WAV samples that we have recorded and inscribed. There's 15, I think, and then there's probably a few others on chain, but a lot of them are MP3. We've been concentrating on making this library the highest resolution. I'm now using FLAC, which is a lossless compression format, which does get 40 to 60% off a WAV file. Still large files, but it means that we can make studio masters in this environment. And then with a few plugins, that library of 15 sounds could turn into hundreds of libraries of sounds. It just needs time and patience, people. This is what music is, and this is what has frustrated me a little bit as the builder of this. Every piece of music so far that people have heard has been stuff that I have put together. And I used to be a musician who would work on a song for a month, on a bass line for a month. I mean, I would really get into it. And here I am building this platform for musicians and then saying, right, we have to demonstrate this. I have to write a song, and I give myself 2 hours. And I'm like, you've got to write this song, and then you've got to inscribe it, and you've got to be done in 2 hours because you do not have the time to be, doing this. So I'm really looking forward to getting past this. And actually, someone last week sent me some songs. We've got quite a few songs now kind of ready to go. And we're launching one. I'm launching my own first song. It's like this sort of, I guess, the uncommon goods of Ordinals. I'm launching that next week. It's just going to be, it's not really open. I think there is an open one I'm going to do after that. This one is the very first one. There's just 1,000 of them.
Well, we're actually going to step into that process too, and thank you for taking that time, because I think that's going to be a really exciting point for those of us who are trying to understand the technology, understand like the recursion and all the sort of things that are happening that you're pulling together to bringing to bear for this system. But we're going to walk through that system that you've created just on a very simple, website. It looks fantastic. We've actually queued up a couple of inscriptions that like I was just like, how does this work? I don't know. And I sent you a few files, and you're like, oh, no problem, and you like just threw it in there. So super excited to jump into that process. But going back to that history point, that point of history, as you said, early on it was very, very 8-bit in a sense. And to that point, Violetta Zeroni, who was here on the show sharing the first audio ordinal at the time, the known one, that she inscribed with Leonidas, was it was just like, hey, like this is one of the best voices in the space here on ordinals, just throttled to like as if she was playing off the tiniest phonograph that you can imagine. What has changed in the tech, and who's pushing it?
What has changed the tech? I mean, not a lot has changed the tech in terms of the audio quality, other than finding ways to do things differently. I spoke to a rapper yesterday, and I was trying to explain to him, if they can start to think about forming, because they're going to have to spend money. If you're a vocalist, there's just no way around it. I'm working my best to get studio quality by using FLAC, and there are other methods that I'm looking forward to putting some time into later, where we can create FLAC, we can convert that to base 64, which is text. Then we can use things like gzip. What's really changed with my technology here is the gzip, is the fact that I figured out a way to take regular text data, serialize it so it was very small. I got the original audio, the original 8-minute song that I showed people last week. I got that down to 120.
Causing quite a stir, mind you. 8 minutes inscription, and how many kilobits?
It started as 120 kilobytes, but this is RAV quality, so it would be around a 200 megabyte master.
Yeah,
120 kilobytes because we're using recursion. There's no audio in there; it's just instructional. Then serialized that down to 30, which was my initial target. That made it affordable. It still was going to cost someone, say, $100 to create a studio master, but then from there I have a player that is 150 bytes, and so you can then create your copies. Absolutely, a cost that can compete with the real world. Your production costs in terms of distribution, very, very, very low now. I've got it really, really small, but the master was bothering me, because I want prolific musicians to feel like, don't be precious about it, I found a way to save so much space that you don't have to be precious about it. You don't have to think about it being wasteful. That was one of the things that, as a Bitcoin maxi, I didn't want to waste block space. It is precious.
Thank you very much.
This is like a race to develop the best compression, and that's what I've seen since probably the second meeting I was probably in about ordinals. I was like, the art for me now is compression. I was like, this is a new thing for me. I'm like, there is artistry in the technology now, and let's combine all of these things. Let's combine music and vision and technology into like art, and so that was and that's what we've seen, is amazing leaps and bounds in this tech. So now with this gzip capability, I'm able to take a 30 kilobyte master file and shrink it to a 3 kilobyte binary file. So it's not readable. It just appears. In fact, if you actually click on the inscriptions, it just sort of downloads. It doesn't know what to do with it, because it goes, I've just got a file here. It's just a binary file. But luckily, you don't have to do that. This all happens programmatically on the chain. So now when you are inscribing a song, the player grabs the gzip file. It now has this library, which I have to give out a shout to Hash Magic. He's the person who inscribed this Paco library, which he told me about it. He hadn't inscribed it in a way that was, it wasn't just a library. He'd inscribed it inside an application he built, just like a paint application, Ordinal. So it's an Ordinal that you can do painting in, and then you can save those files. And then his internal gzip means that your paintings are very small. And I'm looking forward to probably doing some collaboration with him in the future to combine the two forms.
Because there's a whole community here, as you're saying. There's a lot of people who are working on areas of compression and sort of figuring out, Casey Rodermar, that are kind of coming to combine. Is there like a chat that you guys like? How are you guys collaborating in a sense? Like, how are you guys riffing on each other's ideas? Is there a central communication source?
I mean, I have a Discord, like there's an Ordinals Discord, but it's not really populated yet. It's got probably the 20 people who I first told about the project a year ago are in there.
Well, we're going to change that. We're going to put that down below, that link down below. After
it would be great to get people in there, and I will certainly react. If people want to get in there and chat, I'm not. I'm not like a community lead in that way. I'm not there to sort of. I'm very, very busy developing, and it's like this is just it's all I want to do. And I'd love to get a community to form, and I'll input as much as I can, but I don't want people to sort of see me as a figurehead that needs.
Well, I think that's the beautiful thing that you've been doing here. You've been creating a system and a platform that allows this permissionless and asynchronization of the work and of the collaboration. And so maybe let's just jump into that. Because I think it's a lovely concept for the platform. And so let's pull up Ordinals.com, which is your player or your sequencer.
This is the sequencer. This is the off-chain part of it. I have inscribed a version of the sequencer. This is one I inscribed a while ago. I don't know what inscription number it is, but I did start out saying, I'll try and make this all something that's completely inscribed. But of course, the sequencer, it just needs some loving. It needs to be made to work. And so I've kept this part off chain, and then the player is on chain. So as we add modules, as things become available for the sequencer, it's then a sort of a two-step process to say, okay, now this works in the sequencer, this module now needs to be added on chain, and now anything that you do in the sequencer, the on-chain version will just understand and will play.
And while you were sort of demoing it with the video that you sent me, it was just simply put, it's just 16 tracks, and then to choose the track, usually like, okay, like I recorded lead vocals, and then so I'm just going to add that to the track. You just use that to point to an inscription.
So I've loaded some of those tracks that you sent in, and we can see that we can load in here, and we've got this. This is the entire inscription, but what we've done is we've just taken just that section,
the sample,
and then if we loop it up, you can drag these start and stop endpoints in here, and then you can turn on loop just to make sure. What you have, you can then go back out, and then you can place that in the window here. If I take these away, we'll see. These are just the steps.
Oh, then I can just place it as a sequencer. Gotcha.
So you can see, oh, that's what's going on here as well. As I can see that I can hear just that I've got that loop a bit early there. But anyway, we'll get this now looping up, and we can start.
Thanks to whoever described that big eight.
This stuff up, and then of course there's also pitch. Now what you send me here, we've got this is now, there's a tempo, we've got 145, and that's because we have set the project to fit around this loop here, which we haven't pitch shifted, we haven't changed its length anyway, so we're there. But if we wanted to bring one of these other sounds in, let's have a look at some of the other things that are in here. Yeah, that's a really nice sound, that. But that one, of course, is a different tempo, a different pitch, and so it's like making two songs work together could work. It could be very tricky and discordant. But then what we can do is we can go into the pitch and we can change the speed of how that plays.
I love that these are all on chain, and we know, like, you know, this is the author, this address is the author. Is there a way to attribute these great tracks that we're hearing to artists other than right now just this?
100%.
Yeah.
Because this is what I'm saying to you, is that when you look in here, and we have resequenced this section into, you know, supporting another song, just that single section. And when I inscribe this song is going to, in its very DNA, part of that 3 kilobytes is, in fact, the largest part of that 3 kilobytes is the ordinal IDs for each of these pieces of audio. So I have an ordinal ID for this song that we've sampled a little section out of. We might have just sampled just the kick drum. We might have been like, we just love this kick that happens here, or this tiny bit of vocal. We're just going to grab that.
But because it's on chain, we know that that originated.
It's never even removed. You know, this is the thing. I think people will. This is another miracle of blockchain and cryptocurrency. That, you know, it doesn't make sense because we're just not used to thinking about things that way. But you can't take it away. The attribution. Nothing is removed from the song. In the old days, we took a CD or a recording and we recorded it off and we put it into our platform. We messed around with it, and then you've got years of labels chasing after finding out, was that our sample that was used? It doesn't even sound like our sample, but we'll never know if it was. Whereas in this world, that stuff, it's the opposite. It's like someone can take a sample and truly make it sound completely unrecognizable. And this will happen because this process we're building here, this Merkle tree, it never ends. If I take a sound that is a kick drum and I speed it up and I stretch it out using on-chain plugins, I'm creating an on-chain channel of programmatic assembly. I'm creating a channel path for this kick drum to become this high-pitched shriek. Someone else listens to my inscribed song and they decide they're going to pull that high-pitched shriek out. They're going to modulate it, turn it into something else. And eventually, after 5 or 6 different artists have done this, it might be that sound just sounds like something completely disassociated with the original kick drum. Yeah. But if you actually go into that song and click on that sound, you're going to follow an on-chain path that's going to lead you back to say that every time you listen to this weird sound, whatever it is, it is literally pulling this kick. It starts as this kick drum. There's no recording. Everything is programmatically assembled every time you listen to it.
Can you imagine a future?
The interesting thing about this is there's no song. There's no recording. There is no, when someone's not listening to these things, they don't exist. There's no song unless someone executes the file.
Can you imagine a future where that attribution actually becomes part of an income for that person? Say, like, you know, I put down like this sweet sound or these sweet vocals, and somebody, you know, has been using, and that attribution goes on and is permanent and is fantastic and is amazing. Do you imagine a future where that can then become passive income for that artist?
I'm doing this now. You know, this song that I'm going to be launching next week, you know, 20% of whatever is received through the mint is going to be divided and paid to all the elements of the song, because the way the song is structured, it just contains an ordinal ID for every element that's used. And that's not just the samples, it's also like plugins. If someone's created a synthesizer, I have got some synths that are going to be integrated into it soon. But the real beauty of this is I'm building these things, but no one has to use the things I'm building. They can just build their own synths. I've no doubt people will build much better synths that work better. But whoever gets the cool plugins on chain and they start being used, certainly from my perspective, everything that goes through Ordinals, every mint that I do for other musicians, I'm going to certainly through the platform, I'm going to enforce the 20% royalty that goes out to all the sample holders and plugin holders. And then beyond that, I'm just going to try to suggest that people just follow my lead on this and follow the 80-20, because we've never operated in such an efficient environment like this before. Musicians have got used to worrying about, you know, their money and how their money gets to them, how many hands it has to pass through.
Yeah, exactly.
And actually, we can let go of that worry in this environment. People can just start to share, and they can both have their cake and eat it in this new world.
And as we're talking about permissionlessly and asynchronously, be able to just step into this work, see this platform, see sort of the sequencer, experiment, find things, you know, on chain and play. And as you said, it's going to take a community to develop this. What is it that you think, you know, comes next in terms of the types of help that you think that this area needs? You know, you kind of mentioned plugins and the like. What is it? What's the type of help do you think that needs to come?
Some of the kind of boring stuff, I guess. I'm very ADHD, so I tend to just jump on anything that's kind of exciting. But I think if people are like, you know, like EQs, compressors, gates, stuff like that, they're all very small, and then we can bring them into windows like this where they can then operate. Because so far, I mean, this is very versatile. Like, again, if you listen to a snare, for example, and then I can pitch it.
Dude.
And this is all that's just all on chain, you know, because I've also built that the algorithm that does that is also on chain. So when you do that, if you can do that in a sequencer, you can then do it on chain. So you can take any sound in here and slow it down and speed it up and change the pitch. And then you're making a new song. You're making this sound that was just an inflexible sound that you just heard it as it was intended to be heard. But now with just a very small amount of technical innovation on chain, you can speed them up, slow them down, reverse them. That's another great one that I love on here, because this is like the classic EDM thing. Is grab a crash. I got a crash there. Yes, I grab a crash here, which is just a crash. I'll have to mute everything else.
While Jim is playing, I'm going to put all his details down below, including that Discord. I think was an important part of, you know, developing, you know, the questions that you might have. He won't be able to answer them all because he's busy. He's busy debbing right now. He's busy doing, you know, the artistic pursuit within the technology. But I think that as, you know, community develops around this, you know, these areas of being able to ask questions and places to ask questions of each other is important. So, you know, follow Jim as well. But Jim, before we go, like, so I get it up to this point, and I've made the tweaks, and you know, let's say I'm happy with, you know, how it's sounding. I threw in some lead vocals, and I minted, you know, and I inscribed those lead vocals on top of that. How do I then take this into the inscription phase?
So at the moment, it's going to be a bit of a custom thing. I am going to build a UI. And again, I hope that eventually everything when I get it to a polished state, I'll just inscribe it. So eventually I don't even have to have a website or anything, but just as it gets built, it's much more convenient to be able to, you know, to work on stuff like this and not just inscribe it. I just hope it doesn't get too expensive by the time we get there. But that's why I've inscribed the player now. So that player, the way I do things now is set. And eventually, you know, if I just died tomorrow, people would be able to unpick it and figure out how to do it.
That's how asynchronous this is. We don't even need a central point of control.
It's supposed to be modular. We're supposed to be able to. This is the first time I've been truly excited about like working. I feel lucky to be working in this tech space, because it's like the tech space as a whole becomes like an organism in this environment, because of the ability to asynchronously do things, because of the ability to steal stuff, because of the ability, because this is what we're
that's the thing.
used
when
to.
you have attribution, you don't have to steal. You can still be an artist and create.
They're getting used to this idea now that it's like it's not stealing anymore, because there is a path. No one has to deny or attempt to prove anything.
Yep.
And I've said this to people since I very first started working in blockchain. It's on the blockchain. You're never going to have to argue with someone about that fact, because there's an unarguable, you know, source of truth.
And what we've been doing as artists, you know, building on the shoulders of giants, can be seen. And I think that that's important. I think it's a beautiful thing that you're working on. And I know that this is just a step in the journey. And I hope to have you back, Jim, because I think you're doing incredible work, and it's certainly getting the recognition it deserves from the community. I saw a lot of that reaction to that 8-minute track, and that's, you know, what prompted me to say, holy hell, how did you do that? But it's a beautiful use of recursion and the technology that's being, you know, that's present and available for, you know, as you said, you know, somebody who has that artistic instinct, might not be full-time dev, might, you know, but is putting a lot of passion into developing, because they're excited.
We're in the age of GPT, and honestly, GPT is really how I've done this, because I'm, like I said, I'm not a developer. I have a technical brain. I have a brain that gets modules and code, but I was illiterate. GPT came along and allowed me to take visions I had in my head and turn them into code. And with the rapidity, it's just incredible what you can achieve with a very small amount. And now that we actually inscribed the Tone.js library as one of the inscriptions, which again, you can go into GPT and say, make me a synthesizer using the Tone.js library. It's like 50 lines of code, and it's built you a thing that's like an actual keyboard. It's incredible what people can do, and people should really look into that, because you can just build a synth in a single prompt. No mucking about exercise. It's an HTML file. It's 3 kilobytes. It costs you $5 to inscribe it. It's all this fun is here to be had right now, and it's really not for geeks, and it's not for the rich. But this time won't last forever. We are facing a rising tide, and now is the time to innovate and get involved and build stuff. And whatever you do now won't go anywhere, but it will be seen forever, and it will be built upon, and it will be seen as being part of a Genesis moment. So just jump in, you know.
Amazing. Thank you, Jim, for this, you know, giving us this, you know, momentum and motivation as well, and understanding, you know, we are at this precipice, and giving us a little peek behind the magic. You know, the magic isn't dead. I'm just more enthusiastic now for you know, everyone's ability to join you. And so again, I'll put follow Jim. I'll put all his details down below. But thank you again, Jim. This has been really fantastic, and really a great peek into, you know, what can come for music.
Really appreciate having me on, man. Thank you.
Thank you.